So I was working for this airline in Churchill, Manitoba, doing odd jobs. I was 19, and I ended up announcing the flight. Usually I gassed airplanes and loaded baggage and did that kind of thing. But they asked me to announce the flight on the PA system in the terminal building, and I did, and this guy came running up to me and said, "Hey, you got a great voice. You ever thought about being in radio?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, I'm the manager of the station here in Churchill," which was a CBC Northern service station. And he said, "I can't find anybody to work the late night shift. And, you're working here during the day." And so that's how I started, September 1968. And I know it sounds kind of crazy now, but in those days, nobody wanted to go up north. Working at any job in the radio station. So I took this one, I was doing it. I eventually suggested starting a newscast. There was no newscast there. And I did, and started making a name for myself, not only in Churchill, but in southern Manitoba, and I was hired to move down to Winnipeg. I moved from radio into television. I started doing a lot of reporting for the Supper Show. I was offered a job at National, moved to Saskatchewan as the national correspondent there. Then I moved to Ottawa, and I was overseas. Started anchoring in the early 1980s, a little bit on weekends while reporting during the week. And then they offered the big job in 1988. So that's kind of a snapshot of how it's all happened from that kind of fluky start, which, people say, well, you can never do that again today. I don't know. That's what they said then. That's what my father kept saying. You'll never get a job. Anyway, it depends on how you deal with the breaks that suddenly are fun. And all of you, everybody in that room, are going to find yourself in positions, your life and careers, where things just come off out of nowhere. You have to decide whether, to move down that road and take a chance. I did, and I got very lucky, but I worked hard and still do. I still work, 12 to 14-hour days every day.
Great. All right. Well, here's our second question. I see sometimes that the emails you send back are from your iPad, and I see you're on Twitter quite a bit. But is social media an important journalistic tool, or is it just a passing fad?
Well, that's hard to say, because these days, things that are so dominant in our lives as tools of communication, a couple of years later end up looking like they were a passing fad. So, where Twitter will be 2 years from now, I have no idea. But it's a great tool right now for a lot of different reasons, just in terms of communication between people, but also in terms of journalism. A year ago, I would say that the majority opinion, certainly in our shop, was one of not ignoring Twitter, but assuming that it gave no value, because there was so much erroneous information on it. And some news agencies, not ours, thank God, but some news agencies got burned by using information that came across on Twitter. You all remember the Gordon Lightfoot was dead story from about a year ago, where a lot of mainstream media ran that. But there's a way of turning that on its head and using Twitter to help you gain information and to help you do your journalism. And we've seen it throughout this year during the unfolding Arab Spring. It was clearly used as a tool by those forces trying to overturn governments in certain countries, but it was also used by journalists to try to understand stories as they develop. And, good journalists who have large followings, it's like an army of people helping you to head towards, eventually going with a story, giving you information. Sometimes not valid, you've obviously got to check it out, but sometimes it's good information. I think of in particular this one chap from NPR, National Public Radio in the U.S. He's got 55,000 followers. He was confronted with a decision about his picture that came across, and this would be in late July, of a weapon that was found in Tripoli that had what looked like a Star of David on it. And some Arab papers were saying that Israel was supplying, based on this picture, Israel was supplying weapons to the Gaddafi forces. And it just didn't make any sense to a lot of other reporters that this could possibly be true, and they stayed away from the story. But this fellow from NPR thought, I want to definitely find out. And so he put the picture out to his followers, and many of whom are, smart foreign policy analysts who believe in his journalism. And he put it out there and said, can anybody tell me anything about this? And this is all within the space, literally, of minutes, at the most a couple of hours. And within a 2-hour time frame, he was able to determine that in fact, that weapon, it wasn't a Star of David, it was a Camel, and it was made in Israel, it was made in India. So it was an Indian weapon that had come into Libya. Now, that may seem like a small thing, but you consider the impact that story could have had if it had gone everywhere as, that's an Israeli weapon, and Israel is selling weapons to Gaddafi, versus what in fact turned out to be the truth. So there are ways of turning this on its head, and I'd say that I've only been on Twitter a couple months. I don't, tweet a lot, maybe a couple times a day. I try to give a general sense of sort of where I am and what I'm doing. And I use it to promote things that are coming up on our program. And sometimes I just have fun with it. Most people think I'm a overly serious guy because they see me usually just in the format of doing news. But I also know how to have a good time. So I want to show a little bit of that side of me. So that doesn't hurt either. But overall, listen, things are changing so rapidly. When you guys were in public school, none of this was happening. Well, that wasn't that long ago to me. It seems like yesterday, 10 years ago. The kind of challenges we were facing were the explosion on the television landscape, the number of channels. We never thought we'd be dealing with a full-bore battle for information followers with the internet. It was never expected it. Well, now we're in it. We're trying to use it to our advantage instead of using it as a competitor. And I think it's working quite well for us. But who knows where we'll be 2 years from now? Just look at the way we use technology and the equipment we use, computers, and in all their varying forms. That they seem antiquated within a very short period of time, and so do some of the mechanisms that we all use to communicate.
Great. So this one came up a couple times, and maybe you've thought about it. But with whom was your favorite Mansbridge one-on-one interview?
Yeah, I do get asked this quite a bit, and obviously famous people, you get some Russian doing, a president of the United States or the leader of a worldwide religion, a big political figure, a big sports figure, an entertainment figure. Those are, there's a certain amount of excitement surrounding that, but there's also, as I'm sure many of you have seen already in your journalistic careers, the more you do those people, the more you start to think that can't break them out of a mold. They've got kind of a message track that comes with them after years of giving interviews, talking about their work, or in the case of political figures, they're trying to, spin a certain storyline. Quite frankly, the interviews that I enjoy the most, and the interviews that have had the most impact on me as a person, are ones with, to use the cliche, ordinary people who are caught in some form of extraordinary circumstance. Because there is no spin. They're telling you what happened, how it impacted them, their families, or the people they were with, in such a way that you don't doubt just having a great conversation and exploring the moment. I did one of those just a couple of weeks ago with this young woman who survived a plane crash in August, where sadly I lost good friend. But she, within less than a month after the crash, she'd been badly hurt, but she got thrown out of the plane on impact. She was never unconscious. She remembered everything that happened. And she told this incredible story of how that few minutes unfolded. And it was gripping, not just to me, but to the audience. We're able to tell when people watching our program minute how many are watching. So you can tell in the middle of the night, you've lost viewers, we've gained viewers, and often you look at that item and you can see exactly where you are. With this woman, it stayed exactly the same through a whole 25 minutes. And that's extremely rare. She was a pretty special, incredible story. But, I go back in the early to my career. I was in Southeast Asia when the people left Vietnam in the late 1970s. And some of the stories they told of the decision to flee Vietnam, what it was like on the open seas, literally with pirates and, overcrowded boats. It was terrible. They did it all to try to make a better life for their family. Thousands of men come to Canada, and I continually meet people who came to Canada as a result of those days. And I know the impact that, not just as a journalist, but as a person. So those are the interviews that really make a difference. But if you want names that getting a chance to meet the President of the United States White House, big deal. It's really a big deal. CBC, we've never had a one-on-one interview with the President of the United States since we started in 1930. Getting that, a major coup.
Great.
Is nobody else allowed to ask questions?
Sure, we can take one from the audience if anybody has one they want to ask.
Fine. Listen, you do it any way you wish, but anybody wants to ask anything, don't be shy.
All right. Yeah,
Can you hear me, Peter?
Yeah.
Going back to your one-on-one series, I want to talk about your most recent one with Dr. Anne McKee, because I've been kind of following the whole concussion issue for a while. Now, in the sports world, it's kind of been a hot-button issue for probably 2 or 3 years now. But in the news world in this country, do you think it would have gotten as much attention over the last couple of months if what had happened to Sidney Crosby didn't happen?
No, I think that's a fair conclusion to you all, and I don't think it's just the news media, but parents and kids have all started looking at this in a different way since he got hurt. I mean, I think we're moving towards those kind of thoughts on the part of a lot of people, because the game has changed. I mean, there's no argument about this. The play is faster, the players are bigger, and therefore the collisions carry that much more impact. But when you have the best player in the world, or arguably the best player in the world, and a very popular Canadian figure, out of the game for at least, not 10 months now, and maybe never be the same, you worry. You go to his parent, you've got a 12-year-old son, he played hockey, and I worry about things like that. Now, once we decided to move into it, there's no question on our part, we invested a lot of money, time, resources, and people into looking at hockey story. We started in the spring, and it all happened because of Crosby. You are right in thinking. The decisions to do what we did, and I spent a lot of time on it, and we've got a lot of coverage of the journalism that we've done on this issue, and that here today in Boston, plus all the research work we've done at the Boston Lab, you know, it was really an eye-opener for me. It was quite something. And it's I know for the players that I've talked to, that it's had a real impact on them, in spite of what you may have heard other in the hockey world saying.
Does anyone else have a question to ask? Yeah.
I guess one of my main questions is, what's the one key piece of advice you can give to graduating students about branching off in the journalistic world outside of the university setting?
Well, the main piece of advice I give young journalists is that they got to get away from major centers. You know, like I truly value the time spent in Churchill. You know, I was there for 3.5 years. It wasn't easy for me to get out of there because most people were making in journalism in those days, the late 1960s, where people trained back. I had no back. The little I did have was in podcast. I say you got to get out, get to smaller communities, and work your way up. And I say it for a reason, because big decisions that affect people's lives aren't in Ottawa on Parliament Hill. They're made in school boards, town councils, and it's covering those kind of debates and watching the process from that level. It teaches you in so many ways how to handle the big issues that come up through places like Capitol Hill. I look at those days as the formative ones where I learned so much. Plus, the smaller the operation started, the more areas you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing a lot of work. You're going to appreciate the work that others do a lot more as well. I say, you know, you should want, if you're interested in television, you should want my job. But, you know, start small and work your way into it. I've seen far too many, and I continue to see in television, people come in to my system who all they want to do is anchor. And, you know, they get there and they embarrass and us by being there, because there simply aren't journalists yet. You've got to, you know, I was for 20 years if I ever started anchoring. And I'm glad I did, and I'm still reporting. I'll spend a good part of my day on the phone, talking to contacts, talking to people, developing stories. Never stop that. I agree. So, you know, in both terms, think big, prepare to start small. Don't go to a major center, especially don't go to Toronto. There are enough people, or there are too many people, whose knowledge of the country is all inside the world in Toronto. And that just, you know, our national media, it's just not a good thing. So I guess that's, I'd say, and I'd say be excited of the possibilities there. We're always saying hard to find a job, and the concentration of media ownership is clearly an issue. But the fact is, it's a great, you know, I have honestly say 40 years, never had a day to speak before. I'm always, you know, all learning something new. You're always meeting people. You're always covering new aspects of law. And you learn the good and the bad every day. It's, in that sense, so much more exciting than a lot of other professions I can think of, where they do the same thing every day.
Does anyone have another question? Yes.
Mr. Mansbridge, when you look back on your career, what have you gotten out of it? What do you consider to be, what does journalism mean to you?
That's a great question. I mean, to me, journalism is the opportunity to explore the way people live and the way they relate to each other, to challenge assumptions, to try to find the truth on any level of any number of different stories. I mean, journalist, I guess you'd like to think you could get the center of some story that really changed the world or changed life or somehow had enormous impact on all of us. That's a lot to ask for, because there are those kind of real defining moments at the time. Some could argue if they were in Libya yesterday, and that was a big moment. Well, it was a big moment yesterday. It's not one of those moments that's changed the world. I was in Berlin the week of the wall painting in 1989, and that changed the world. We didn't actually know it at that moment. We knew it was big and significant, and that it was going to have a major impact, but we didn't know all Eastern Europe was going to collapse from its communist back. But that was the beginning of it. It sort of fell in the months and a couple of years after that, and pinpointed all back to this night, November of '89. And to be able to say you were there, breathing the same air as the people who were tearing the wall, it was quite. So, that obviously meant a lot to me. It's, individual story. When you're able to do a story that exposes some scandal or wrongdoing, you do a story that shows people the utter hopelessness of the poor or the downtrodden, or you can bring viewers or readers or listeners to the scene of some disaster where the most vulnerable in the world, all children are deeply affected. You have an audience that is moved by your work to do amazing things. I'm in Vancouver. I'm speaking tomorrow night to some of the top medical people in our country. We're here to go do different things happening on health earth. But one of the stories I'll tell them is about how I was in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, the natural disaster there, the tsunami, 2006. And I was in this little village on the eastern coast of Sri Lanka, and little kids told me about these Canadians who'd given them vaccinations, and I'd actually, a fair amount of search before we went there. One of the reasons we went there was there were no Canadians there, or at least that's what we've been told. There was no, there were aid groups there was government involvement in trying to help different parts of Sri Lanka. Anyway, we tracked down. There was a little field hospital where they were doing the young and the elderly, giving them vaccination. And the three people who were running were three nurses from this city. And nobody sent them there. They went on their own. They took time off from their jobs, paid for their own tickets. They picked board and probably stole equipment from their clinic or whatever, and they went. Got out of the plane in the immigration customs area at Colombo Airport in Sri Lanka, and they just said, "Hey, we nurses from Canada will go anywhere you want. We're here to help." You do those stories. You see the real goods in human beings, and we are incredibly lucky as journalists. I'll tell those stories. They impact on literally millions of people, as well as yourself. You can't come away from a story like that not have impact and effect on.
Mr. Chancellor, great to have you here with us tonight.
When I look back over the people that I've worked with, the journalists that I've met, at all at different time. When I started in the 1960s in television, we were still using black and white, and it was film, not tape. Have to protest and physically cut the film and stuff pieces together. That's how you made a television. So between that, the changing landscape in terms of television, and the tremendous change in the technology that we have available to us, still the determining factor to me as the top attitude of any journalist. It doesn't matter whether they're television or radio or print. the ability to tell story well. You know, it sounds so simple. No, it is beside you in the positions you're in. Story is the most important thing. You got a good reporter, can't tell the story you got. It doesn't matter how much new technology they're using. You've got to have that build story. All different criteria in which they storytellers. In television, you can write a story, their words, with the pictures we've got, the best possible way. And sometimes that means it's the norm to tell a great story, because you've got that back the picture. But still, you know, who I work with, the really great tellers, any one time in our news service, we got a news service, you could probably count on of one hand. And I bet you could be hard to pick your speakers and the reporters you've got that they're working, you would probably say, you know, in terms of potential storytellers, you probably only have a couple, if that. Now, don't feel bad about that. Feel good, because you know it doesn't mean the other aren't getting jobs. Just a great storyteller is important. I was a good storyteller. I wasn't great, but the difference between the great ones and the good ones is significant and clearly obvious to audience. So to me, with all the changes that exist, and they are many, and they have to be dealt with, you have to take advantage of them, where you can, learn from the one for greatest attribute, always be the ability to tell a story well, lift it off the page, and to engage the audience.
Well, I want to thank you, Chancellor Mansbridge, for taking this all the way across the country to meet with this conference. And I think on behalf of the Canadian University Press, I thank you for joining us.
Well, it's been a pleasure for me. I know you're going to have a great weekend, because, of course, it is the best campus in the country. The great things about our business is you do have opportunities like this to get together with people from other, news organizations, and I use that term loosely to you right now, but that will be a constant, in your careers as journalists, if that's what you choose to pursue. And these are really important moments. You not only make friendships, but you learn from the challenges that others are facing. And so, enjoy it and thrive on it. And, at some point on this weekend, have one for me too.
I think there'll be many after you.
Yeah, through the roof. Okay, you take care.
Thanks. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Bye.
Bye.